Hey everybody, I wanted to share some stuff with you tonight. This kind of picks up where I left off last time, and if you remember last time, I was telling you about Stephen Hawking and how he has redefined what he considers a black hole as being something that is actually a portal to another universe. This video, I just wanted to make some more connections. I wanted to find a way to prove to you that the Kabbalah is actually saying the same thing without just me putting some pieces together without showing you any evidence. And in doing so and trying to find this stuff, one thing led to another, and I made all kinds of connections. What I want to show you tonight is the word Adam. Now, Adam in Hebrew is ADM. And what's interesting about Hebrew language and these ancient languages that are similar to it is they were hieroglyphic. And if you go and you start taking a look at the each one of the letters, that you see that they all have values associated with them. And they, which I find most interesting part though is they all have hieroglyphic meanings. So each particular letter is also a symbol for a particular idea or concept. Okay, so have you ever wondered why God called him Adam? Well, he called him Adam because when you take a look at the three letters here and you break these apart, they tell a story. And they tell a story that is extremely similar to the story that we were just covering with regards to the black hole and the nebula and all of this stuff. It's all told in these three letters right here. The whole Bible, once you get a chance to actually look in there and do some research the way I'm going to show you how to do it, you'll find it's written in a completely different language. Remember, the Bible's not only written in parable, but it's also written in a code. And the code is Kabbalistic. Okay? But you don't know that by reading it. You think you're just reading these stories or what have you. And I'm going to point you to Proverbs if you get a chance after this, but it's important that you go grab a copy of eSword. It's free, okay? But these little numbers that you see right here, these green numbers, H2775, okay, so what you're looking at is the English language here, but when I see the word sun and I double click on that, it's important to understand because that's the Strong's word. And what it gives you is it gives you a definition of what it means. For example, Orion is a constellation and it's H3684, any notable constellation, specifically Orion. And it says the same as, and then if we look that up, it says properly fat, that is figuratively stupid or silly, and then it says fool. Okay. Now, these types of clues are extremely important because when we come over here and we take a look at the Fool card in the tarot deck, the Fool is actually number 0, and he sits right here. And that means God coming into manifestation. Okay, so we'll go over that in just a second. But these types of things are really important. But let's get back to Adam real quick. Okay, so people think Adam just simply means, it means like a specific person, that God created this man, this human called Adam, which was a male. No, that's not exactly what it is. Okay, so Adam, when it says, let us make man in our image, in H120, it's really talking about mankind, the individual or the species. But when you dig into the Hebrew letters, you find that you have Aleph, Dalet, and Mem, and these make this whole thing very important. When you take a look at what you have here, you have Aleph here, and you have Daleth here. Now let me show you what these mean. So, up here above Kether are the negative veils of existence. You have a 0, a double 0, and a triple 0. And if you look at that visually, sitting on top of each other, it looks shaped kind of like a pyramid, right? You're kind of moving up into a point, right? The reason the top of the pyramid's cut off is because it's a representation that you never can reach that very top point, okay? it kind of cuts off. And when you're thinking of this visually in the material world, the top of the pyramid is cut off because it disappears into the unseen universe, which is like what we discussed last time. So this describes a story. The creation of Adam describes a story. So Aleph means, and if we go over here to this right here, we see a head, and you can see that it may have been based on an Egyptian hieroglyph, right? Well, Aleph actually means the first. It's the first one, right? Let's see. It stands for number 1. And the mystics, the rabbis and the Jewish mysticism, it represents the oneness of God, which is basically, we're right up there with Kether, right? So the negative veils of existence of Ein Sof are, it gives its light to Kether. Kether becomes the primordial point, okay? And then from Kether, we have the Fool. And the Fool moves down and it manifests itself into wisdom. And wisdom has certain symbolic meanings to it as well. Chokmah, it's wisdom, okay? So this is one being or one reality coming into manifestation and just simply dividing itself into parts. And until it reaches Bina, you can't see it, okay? So Kether, the primordial point, it can't be visualized. It can't be conceived, all right? As it moves down towards the Fool, you can see he's walking down the cliff, right? And Fool stands for Orion. Now, this is probably something that Orion is an analogy. It's an analogy given to us to understand the rest of how things happen in the universe, okay? So it's a great as above, so below picture. But it's the one specifically that all the ancients pointed to, and that's probably why. And it probably has something specifically to do with us, which is why they all pointed to it. So the Fool is moving down, which is basically Kether. Kether is now going to manifest itself. So the first thing that it does is it moves to wisdom. So let's come up here real quick and so he made a large vessel similar to a large excavation. It was filled with the water that flowed from the spring. Now, Chokmah is actually called the spring. So it says, afterward he made a small vessel that is the Yud. It was filled with the source, which is Kether, and he called it a spring of welling wisdom. He called himself in it wise, and the vessel he called Chokmah. Then he made a large vessel and called it the sea. He called it Bina, understanding, and he himself called himself the understanding one. Okay, so what transpired is that he turned himself into this spring, this welling spring of a river, and this is the river that flowed out of Eden, right? So Chokmah represents this force coming out of the primordial point. Now, here's the interesting thing about it. Okay, so this right here, Daleth, and remember, Chokmah still cannot be visualized. Geometrically, it would be kind of like a line. You can't, a line is kind of an abstract thing. The only reason we can see them when we put them on a piece of paper is because we give it 2 dimensions, enough to where we can actually see the line. Otherwise, you can't see it at all. So if you think of it that way, until it becomes a plane, we can't see it. So in this instance, we have this force, which is Chokmah, and then Chokmah goes through a gate, which is Daleth. Okay, so let's hear. This is from the Bible here. Wisdom calls aloud. Wisdom shouts in the street. She lifts her voice in the square. At the head of the noisy street, she cries out. At the entrance of the gates in the city, she utters her sayings. Okay. So this right here is a representation of how things manifest in creation. If you notice at the top, there's a sword. The sword is the flaming sword, and the flaming sword for us represents Orion's sword. Okay? So let's go back down here. Okay. So now this is interesting. He says the water spread, this is from the Zohar, by the way. The water spread from the sea to the seven streams as into long receptacles. And so there is a source, which is Kether, a spring, which is Hokmah, and a sea, which is the way I described it last time. You have a force, a jet, blowing itself into this area, which is called the sea, and it's filling up this area with water. Okay, so, and it says if the craftsman break these, this is the water, this is the spring. Now look at this right here. This is from Frank D. Roylance, 1998. It says a team of scientists using the European Space Agency's Infrared Space Observatory reports it has detected just such a water factory in a gas cloud 1,500 light years from Earth in the Orion Nebula. The cloud is producing so much water vapor that condensed into liquid form, it could fill all the Earth's oceans every 24 minutes. Although we've only detected this sort of phenomena in a single source, it seems very likely it's a widespread phenomenon. So it's describing the spring that's it's basically filling up this area, which is the sea. It's very symbolic, but at the same time, it's also it gives you, I guess, intuition into helping you understand the scientific part of it. So here's Adam. Okay. So this is God coming into creation, or whatever we want to call God. This reality, this consciousness, this manifestation of the material existence, which is the fool coming from Kether, okay, and calling himself Hokmah, the spring, the welling spring, right? And that welling spring goes through the gate right here. And it goes into the sea because Mem, let's see, where's Mem? Okay, so Mem, water, coming from water. So the Hebrew mem means a massive amount of water. And so what we see is that manifestation is coming through into a welling spring and filling up an area. So until it goes through that gate, then you're not aware of it. So that's what's really interesting here, because it's telling us that this is the concealed wisdom, and until it goes through that gate, you can't see it, so you don't know where the source is coming from. You can only know that this spring it's coming from somewhere, and this is where it's coming from Kether, which we can't see, and Kether gets its light from the world of formation, which is right above it, which in one of the negative veils of existence. So this is how manifestation comes into being. So it's actually doing exactly what we're hearing scientifically. Now let me tie some of this together for you real quick. As far as Orion goes. Okay, so Dion Fortune, she was born in 1890. Okay, so she produced a text called the Mystical Kabbalah, one of the better texts out there as far as the Kabbalah goes. So I wanted to capture some stuff here for you and then tie a couple things together. So Kether, okay, which is this top thing right here. Okay, this... it says, among other titles, which we need not consider now, Eric Anpin, the vast countenance, the white head, remember the head is the chief, the chief person. And if you remember there, the old Hebrew, it was a bull's head, right? The magical symbol of Kether, according to Crowley, is an ancient bearded king seen in profile. McGregor Matthews says the symbolism of the vast countenance is that of a profile, in which only one side of the countenance is seen. The reason why that is because you can't see the left side of the face, because the left side of the face is pointing towards Kether, and this is wisdom. So you could look at the front side of it, but not the other side of it. So, and then right here she says, it's interesting to note that in the world of Asiya, the title, and Asiya means the physical world, the title of the sphere of Kether is Rashith Gilgalim, or first whirlings, thus indicating that the rabbis were acquainted with the nebular theory before science was acquainted with the telescope. Okay. So then right down here she has the magical image of Kether, and it's an ancient bearded king seen in profile. Okay? And then here, which I think is really interesting, is the correspondence to the microcosm is the cranium, and actually it's the skull, and some of these body parts that you see in here, I've seen some Kabbalists, and when I say Kabbalists, I mean people that are from the stuff a long time ago. When you start getting into the later stuff past like the 1900s or the 1920s or something like that, you start getting into this weird trashy stuff. It's not any good anymore. So that's why I like to go back as far as possible. So anyways, the correspondence in the microcosm is the cranium, or the sa. Okay, now that's an important word, but we'll see in just a second. Because she says, as above, so below, the microcosm corresponds to the macrocosm, and we must therefore seek in man the Kether above the head, which shines with a pure white brilliance in Adam Kadmon. So, Kether, being the nebula, is shining with a bright brilliance in Adam Kadmon. It's a reflection of what's above that you can't see, that's unmanifest. It's a rough image of it, but you're basically seeing some form of a reflection of the unmanifest when you're taking a look at this area. And the Egyptians called it the Sa. So Sa is related to Kether, which is related to the nebula, and we know that the very most important constellations to the Egyptians was Orion. Okay? Now here's what the Hebrew language does also. So the Phoenician glyph for a door looks like this. This is where the gate is. This is where the black hole is supposedly being looked at by scientists. And the trapezium is shaped almost exactly like Daleth, which means door. Okay. Now, if we take a look at the Hebrew version of Daleth, or door, it's an open door. So what we can see here is that these angelic languages, like Hebrew, these types of languages, when you create a word, the word is formed with letters that each have meaning that tell a story. But on top of that, the letters also have symbolic meaning to them as well. So they have a picture meaning. So that's the reason you can't do that with the English language anymore. And it's also really important why you dig into the code of these meanings. And what you'll find when you go into the Bible, when you start reading about wisdom and understanding and these types of things, if you'll go through Proverbs and start reading it, you'll see that it's speaking in Kabbalistic language, because it'll talk about, it'll say get wisdom and get understanding, or if you can't have understanding if you don't have wisdom, and it shows how it manifests down the tree. And it goes in that order every time. So whoever did this, they knew what the code was. The Bible is Kabbalistically written. This is the lightning flash and this is for Orion's sword. And yeah, here's Sa. Sa was the deification of the constellation of Orion, representing Kether representing the nebula. These are all the things that I've been saying now for years. I was just able to put this together recently. Here's an image that Michelangelo created that you guys have seen before. And he actually did this, of course, 100 years before we even could see it with a telescope. Here is a zoomed-in image of just simply the head of this guy. And what I'm doing here is I'm showing you the image. I'm showing you a mix between the two, and then this is all just nebula right here. And I'm doing the same thing down here. So I've zoomed into a very, very small portion just to show you how I do the recognition part of this thing. And you can see that the stuff is copied all the way through. As well as you can see her all the way through. You can see the image of the brain and in right profile. So what you're actually looking at is if you were looking at someone's face looking towards the right, and you were to slice their head in half where you were looking at the left side of their brain, then what you're looking at is you're looking at the manifested part of Chokmah, or wisdom. The unmanifest being the left side, which is faced towards the opposite direction. So anyway, so everything he did was just genius with this. This Daleth here, this is Blavatsky talking about it. She says the symbolic signification of Kabbalah of Daleth is door. It's the Greek delta, D, so think of Nile Delta, because the Nile Delta is an image of what we see in the trapezium, through which the world whose symbol is the tetrad, or number 4. And the reason that's important, and she says because it issued producing the divine 7. So when you have 4 points, you have your first solid, because this is the way things manifest as it gets down to here. So you have a point, then a line, then a plane, and then you have a solid, and at that point you have manifestation into the physical world. And that's why down here, this is the world of Asiya down here. And if you notice, he's holding one right here, and he says, the stars in the heavens sing a music if we only had ears. What I've noticed about all of this stuff is that there's definitely something going on here beyond what the normal, what people would consider normal, because these people were able to put this stuff together intuitively, and I think a lot of it had to do with symbolism and hieroglyphics. I think we lost something when we lost hieroglyphic language. We lost it's almost like because nature shows itself in symbols, and when those symbols are taken and put into a language and correctly assigned or correctly designed in order to match those symbols, then you understand nature, you understand everything so much better. And so what we've done is we've lost that. But anyways, I wanted to show you how all this was tied together, including Orion and Kether, and what's actually happening here with Adam, right? So you have Kether, which is that primordial point you can't see, moving into creation. This is the Fool moving down into Orion. Lo, Osiris has come as Orion. That is utterance 442. And that's exactly what we see here. He's come as Orion, turns himself into a spring, a welling spring, and then moves through the gate and fills up the area, which is the area that contains the whole Orion Nebula. And that shine that happens causes a reflection of what is in the unmanifest realm. And this is what you also read when you read all of the various texts. And this is also why you see this at the high altar in all of these cathedrals as well. The high altar area represents the head. The head is the first thing that comes into existence. That's what these 3 right here are. And this is the river that went out of Eden, right? And it became 4 heads, and those 4 heads are they are Bina, wisdom, there's Doth, which is the central brain, and they're all right here. If you go read the Zohar, I can't remember the exact wording, but the Zohar is good about helping you understand the code a little bit, but when you start picking it up yourself, like if there's something you're interested in, if you start decoding these words, like for example, Chokmah is represented as the brain, which is represented as wisdom, but it also has the heart. It's a representation of the brain and heart together. Okay? So they are one at this point. But if you take a look at the formation of the word Chokmah, if you break it into two, in Zohar it was saying that if you break it into two, one represents brain and one represents heart. Over here you have heart only. Okay? This is representative of why you see the tetractys right here. So first you have Yod, and then you have, so this is where they're together all at once. And then you have them broken into two. Then you have the brain, and then you have the heart. Bina is the heart, right? Then you have three. And if you notice, you've got that same pattern of creating a man. Then you have three right here, and this represents the central area, and then this is the bottom area. So anyways, I'm rambling at this point, but I wanted to show you guys what I found here. And so when you start putting all this stuff together, it's just amazing. So I recommend you go grab an e-sword real quick and take a look at these Strong's Concordance meanings. You'll get a lot out of them, and then you can start understanding why something was called the way it is, because when you start breaking it all apart and understand the meaning of each letter, then it kind of tells a story. And you can also see the way that they look. Like, for example, gate looks like an open door. And this looks like the area of the sea right here. So it's just kind of interesting how they design these things. So anyways, you guys take care, and I'll talk to you soon.